Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome back to the T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Spencer Locker.
We love it. We absolutely love it. So we want to sort of jump on and we want to do a bit of an off-the-cuff thing. Me and Spencer was talking recently in the office and I said, Spencer, why don't you we'll go in cold and you can just pick a topic, challenge me, ask a question and I'll give it my best shot and we'll just debate it. So I'm pretty nervous.
Yeah. Shouldn't be, because you know your stuff, don't you?
Well, this is the ultimate do you know your shit podcast.
Yeah.
Or is it just all smoke and mirrors, right?
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be an easy one, this one. When I say easy, I mean obviously it's relative. But what I think, because I think ultimately at some stage in the near future I'd like to actually sit you down and do a proper interview. Ask you things about your motivators and your views on things and why you do what you do and just getting past the I'm Martin Johnson, all born and bred bit. just going a little bit deeper than that. But what we're going to do today, what I'd like to do today is talk to you about a concept that it's probably not an alien concept, but it's the name that you gave it. Right. That really sort of prompted my curiosity.
You got me thinking now.
What I'd like to ask you, well, no more fluffing. What I'd like to ask you is about this canteen effect that you talk about.
The canteen effect.
Yeah. So what's that all about then?
Yeah. If I remember rightly, I used the term canteen effect when we was talking about the importance of developing a social ecosystem within a business or within a department or an organisation.
Okay, so what do you mean, before we go on to the canteen effect then, what do you mean by social ecosystem?
So for me, a social ecosystem is, as a business, as an organisation, yes, you do what you do. You provide the products or services you provide. You transact what you do with customers. You deliver what you do to customers. And internally, there's a whole lot of process and a whole lot of and the systems and there's all sorts of stuff that you need to be able to do to deliver that. So it can be quite an operational, task-based, transactional environment. So a social ecosystem for me is when you do all of those things really well as a business, but you are also providing an environment in the workplace for human beings, for your employees to be able to connect with other people, to build meaningful relationships with others, and therefore come together socially as a group and as a collective, which then will hopefully increase rapport, increase trust, increase collaboration, and without a shadow of a doubt, it will deliver greater results for the business.
So when you say social ecosystem, it is directly related to an ecosystem in the sense that you've got a number of diverse elements, a number of different entities working together to maintain and ultimately improve their situation. Yeah.
And I think you always, when we talked about this, and I know you've done some work on the hub, if we want to signpost people to the, to the section where you've done a little bit on this already, I think is it the wellbeing section?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So in the wellbeing section, we've talked about the importance of a social ecosystem, and you always used to describe it as like a reef. A barrier reef or a coral reef.
Yes. So you've got the diverse elements working together. They've all got different strengths. They've all got different things that they can do really well. And where they've got a weakness, there's usually something else there that can cover that weakness. So they all work together in harmony. Because I suppose it is harmonisation. Yeah. And it's in a sympathetic environment. Yeah. So you're maintaining and improving that environment, which you can really sort of transpose that across onto a business, can't you? Which you have done.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, it's sort of this concept of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Yeah. And in the best organisations we work with, and the great places to work, and the businesses that tend to flourish, they do go out of their way to provide a great ecosystem and allow their employees to work in an environment where they can build rapport, where they can collaborate, and in effect, they are avoiding creating what we call siloed behaviour or siloed teams, where it's us and you.
Yeah.
So it's really important to think about this as managers and leaders. So I think that's the explanation around a social ecosystem. But I think coming back to the canteen effect, I use it as a way of giving you an example of how you can do this, how you can foster a social ecosystem. And it stems back to a personal experience I had at an organisation called Gartner. And Gartner was a global company. It was a wonderful company. And I was based in the north of England, but I was reporting into the head office in Egham. And in the head office, it was like a 4-story building, and there was different teams and levels and departments on every floor. But right at the bottom of the building was, you used to scan your badge and enter into the building. And on the ground floor was like a canteen. It was a coffee shop. And so what would happen is, you'd scan your badge, you'd go in the morning. The first thing everyone would do would straight through and hit the morning coffee, and you'd queue up for your coffee. It was an area where it had comfy seating and pods and different spaces for people to go and catch up or socialise or whatever it might be. And you know what? I built more relationships in that coffee queue and in that area than any other place in the building, than any meeting room, on any conference call or whatever it might be. I used to go and grab my coffee in the morning, and the regional vice president would be stood behind me. And I'd never see this guy usually. And how are you doing, Martin? Yeah, how are you doing? And we'd exchange and we'd build relationships, and it sort of created a central hub where people met and people interacted and people built rapport and got to know each other. And what happened then very quickly after is people stopped using the meeting rooms and stopped going to meet people in their departments and their offices and say, why don't we meet downstairs in the Costa? Other coffee brands are available. But why don't we go downstairs and grab a coffee in the comfy seats, and we'll have our meeting there? So it just became this thriving hub for people across the business. There was lots of it. And bearing in mind, there's 4,500 employees in this organisation. Yeah. It just became this central hub where people could, come together, socialise, have meaningful and productive meetings, and it just worked. So I guess my term, the canteen effect, is it might not be a canteen, but what is it for you? What are you doing as a business to foster an environment and allow people to come together in that type of fashion?
Right. And to be honest with you, I came across a similar situation down at Tesco in Welwyn Garden City. Very similar situation. But okay, fair enough then. So we're talking, bearing in mind we work with multinational companies, but we also work with smaller local companies as well. So you started talking about then it doesn't have to be a canteen. It doesn't have to be this big thing. And when you start talking about multinational companies, you talk about larger global businesses. That might be something that it wouldn't really be a big issue for them to implement something like this. However, when you start talking about smaller businesses, more local businesses, can you sort of explain or sort of visualize possibly what they could do rather than build a canteen? Yeah,
and if you're thinking, good question. If you're thinking about a social ecosystem, you've got to think about how we can allow our employees to build meaningful relationships in the business, and also how can we connect with them as the leadership team and as the board or the business owners or whatever it might be. So I think you've got a physical element. And then you've got a relationship element. So if you look at the physical element, what can companies do who maybe aren't blessed with 6 floors of office space and a Costa at the bottom of the of the building? Well, think about the physical element. The space. So the use of office space is quite interesting to me. So we go into organisations, don't we, where it's very tunnely and it's like a warren. You go down corridors, you've got offices, individual offices on either side, lots of small meeting rooms. Every team sits in a different area of the business, which is separated by doors and walls. That is not overly it doesn't lend itself to social interaction and collaboration. And actually, it starts to create from a physical perspective, create siloed behaviour. Not saying it's wrong, but that's some of the office spaces people have to operate in.
Yeah.
But what can you do? On the contrary, we go to other offices where it's a completely open plan. And yes, the modern day world is to try and promote open plan working space or hot desking, or you come in and you move around and and you create a buzz, and you can, and it does contribute to a social ecosystem. But then it's sort of, if you completely open plan, you're not catering for certain people in the business who need some private space.
Yeah.
We always talk about introverts. Introverts in your business won't thrive in an open plan office space.
Yeah.
Are surrounded by extroverts who are very loud and brash, right?
Yeah.
They need thinking time, personal space, headspace. They need to complete a drawing, or if they've got a very technical role or whatever it might be. So, neither extremes cater for social ecosystems to work effectively. I think the middle ground and the balance is what we advise. Try and at least do what you can within the office space you have to have a level of open plan collaborative space.
Yeah.
But you still need some private office space for the people who need it most, or for private confidential conversations, or for the introvert who wants to lock themselves away and get on for a morning.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we observe as what smaller businesses can do.
Yeah.
And it could be just removing a wall or two.
Yeah.
Opening up a bit of a space, bringing two teams together who need to collaborate more, whatever it might be.
And that links really well into the discussions that we have about, again, the social ecosystem. So you've got the diverse elements, the different people doing different jobs, different responsibilities, but they're all working in harmony towards the same goal. But they can only work in harmony if they're working in a sympathetic environment.
Yeah.
So that sympathetic environment, as we've just talked about there, could be physical. But when we start talking about the physicality, we don't limit it to the physicality, do we? We also link it to the culture.
Yeah.
And that sympathetic environment is something that leaders and managers can create, where we're talking from a cultural point of view.
Yeah. So, for example, we've talked in Pathways on the Hub about FBIs, family-based initiatives. So if you want to engage your employees and you want to create more of a social side to the employees' experience, then we're a bit behind on this. If you look at Eastern culture over the years, like Indian culture and Japanese and Chinese culture, they make far more of an effort to engage the direct family members of the employee than we do in the Western world. Yeah. It's well known previously in Indian culture that if you go for an interview with a company, quite often your mother, father, wife, or husband will be sat in the interview. It's as much their decision as it is yours. Yeah. And it's also common sort of culture and known that if you're in, for example, Far Eastern culture, say you're in Japan and your father worked for 30 years for a car manufacturing company, then you tend to follow suit, right? Yeah. So, and they actually have programs to bring in family members into the organization. So family-based initiatives, FBIs, I love an acronym, as you know, is what are you doing as a manager or leader, even at a departmental level or as an organizational level, to include the family members of your employees. Now, I know a lot of organizations do the summer barbecue or invite the partners to the Christmas night out or whatever it might be, and that goes a long way. But, what else can you do to actually engage the family in what their partner does? As an example of this, it doesn't always have to be a fancy day out or a Christmas party. Yeah. We deploy at T2 flexible working hours in the concept of, I don't really dictate the start and finish time of the employees here. I say you do it around your own commute and your own regime. You either if you're an early bird like you, Spence, you prefer to get up early because you are up early, get on the road, beat the traffic and be here for 7 a.m., right? Yeah. But it means that maybe come 3:30, 4, you're done, right? Yeah. You equally want to, Claire, for example, who works here, she does the school run in the morning, so she's not going to get here till 9, etc. So we operate that. What we also create is complete flexibility around sports days, dental appointments, doctor's appointments, school trips, whatever it might be. So you can have that much needed time. Let's face it, you very rarely, you only get a few chances to watch your kids on sports day, right? Yeah. So if it's in working hours and you go. So by doing that, I think what you're doing, or what it does for us, if you think about it, is it engages our extended family in a way where they really appreciate that of the employer. So when I ask you, Spencer, as a senior consultant in Trans2 to go away for 3 or 4 days and deliver a project to a customer, your wife, Sharon, is more than okay with that because she gets you when she needs you in other points of the year. Yeah. Now, that's an example from us personally of how you're creating a social element, an interpersonal relationship-based element of your organization. And FBIs or family-based initiatives is a really good way to do that.
Yeah. So if I may, I totally get and I totally appreciate what you've said, but right now I'd like to play devil's advocate. Okay.
Shock.
So, yeah, we've got people listening to this. They're not of a fixed mindset. They're quite open. They're quite open to development. They're quite willing to listen to other theories. Maybe not take them at face value, but they could inform a sort of a journey for them. And I want to go down here and I want to have a look at this and see how it can benefit my workforce and ultimately my organisation. But there's people out there that's going to go, why? I employ people to do a job. They come in, they do the job, they get paid, they go home.
Yeah.
Why should I put myself through all the trauma of organising stuff that they probably won't appreciate anyway? They're not interested in this, that, and the other. You know, the fixed mindset people who are usually at the head or in the sort of an executive management team of a company that may not be failing, but are very not progressing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is devil's advocate, but it's a great question because there will be people out there, and it's a generational thing to an extent, but there will be people out there who say, well, what's the problem, right? You've got a job. I pay you to do that job. You come to work, you do your job. I'm not paying you to socialize, and I'm not paying you to work in a fun open plan office and have fun with everybody.
Yeah.
So you get here, in my day, you come to work, you crack on with your job, you go home, you get paid, right? And I understand that to an extent because as a leader of a business myself, you want productivity, you want the ultimate end game, you want the business to be successful. Yeah. You want to grow the business, you want to delight your customers, and you want to keep everybody in jobs, right? So you can get caught up in that transactional mindset of, I'm paying you to do a job, not, you put up with anything else. But I would ask people to, if I was going to answer that question, I'd have to maybe split it into 2 things I want people to consider. The first thing I would say is, if you go back 2 million years, and you look at us as a species, as Homo sapiens, we're an animal, right? We foraged the earth for millions of years. We never really evolved. We never progressed much. We foraged either individually or in very small groups. We were at the bottom of the food chain, or not quite at the bottom, but we were in the middle somewhere. And we never really progressed. And then something happened. We discovered fire. We discovered how to use fire to cook our food, our meat that we caught. And all of a sudden then, Homo sapiens back then had really big intestines because we was eating raw food, really. Yeah. And what happened is when we started to cook our food, we started to be able to digest it much more efficiently and quicker. Yeah. So our intestines shrank over a period of time. Our nutrients and blood flow and everything changed. Our brains grew. We started developing a logical side of our brains. And then the cognitive revolution, they call it, we started to learn how to use fire to make tools. We learned how to use tools to hunt, how to build buildings, so all of a sudden we started very quickly evolving, and then we hit the agricultural revolution, which is we found out that once we could go to the top of the food chain, we could now use the tools and the knowledge that we'd gained to start farming. When we could farm, we could harvest huge amounts of crops and food sources to last us 3 to 6 months at a time. Yeah. It also meant we could sustain larger groups of people in an environment at one time, which is why communities started evolving and collaborating. And when communities started evolving and collaborating, the rest is history.
Yes.
Right? You got scientific revolution, industrial revolution, and we now sit here today in the digital revolution. So why am I telling you that story, and why is that important? We did very little for millions of years in isolation. The minute we could sustain a community of individuals in a social ecosystem, we are fast forwarded in maybe 100,000 years to where we are today.
Yeah.
And that is the power of social ecosystems and collaboration. And that is why if you want a productive environment, people working in isolation or in small groups are nowhere near going to be as productive as a collective.
Yeah.
If you get it right.
Yeah.
And that's the first sort of scientific reason I would give you. The second thing I've got to sort of say is think about the generations who are in the workplace today, but the future generations coming through. A lot of people talk about millennials, and millennials get a hard time, right? But people misunderstand what a millennial is.
Yeah.
Millennials are people born after 1980.
Yeah.
So people up to 36 years old at the present day, they're already in the workplace, sometimes in positions of leadership and command.
Yeah.
And, yes, you've got the younger end of the millennial generation who are but you've got some established people.
Yeah.
Generation Z are coming through after the millennials.
And this is what people seem to mistakenly refer to as millennials, isn't it? In popular,
the millennials of today. Well, Generation Z, therefore, is anybody who was born at the turn of the millennium.
Yeah.
So 16, 17, 18-year-olds now are Generation Z.
Yeah.
Now, these are the people who have grown up with technology. These are the people who have grown up in a completely different area under the digital revolution. Yeah. So they are the future of the workplace, with millennials slowly but surely taking up the positions of hierarchy and command, right? So when you look at those two generations, they have more choice in the workplace and in the marketplace now than ever as a result of technology, as a result of the way the workplace works these days. For example, two generations prior, you were pretty restricted by location to where you worked.
Yeah. There
was no home working. There was no technology that allowed you to collaborate and communicate from many different locations via the telephone, other than the telephone and fax.
Yeah.
Right. So you tended to work for the companies within your area. So companies had a lot of choice of the talent within their areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you fast forward to today, though, you can work for anybody, anywhere, with anything. Companies are competing for the talent like never before.
Yeah.
And because Generation Z and millennials have more choice, you can't just afford to take the standpoint of, well, you come here, I pay you a wage. What's the problem?
Yeah. If you don't like it.
Yeah. Well, okay then.
Yeah.
We the average, I think the average tenure of a job in the modern day is about 3.5 years,
right?
Average, and then people move on. It's not so long back when I first looked at this stat that it was 7 years. It's halved in the space of probably 5 to 10 years.
Right. Okay.
So if people are spending 3.5 years and are moving on, in employment these days, then you want to get a good 3.5 years out of them, or you want to engage them in such a way that they want to stay longer.
Yeah.
Right. So it is changing. The landscape's changing. And what I'm saying around placing an importance on environment and social ecosystems and the way people collaborate and family-based initiatives is because you want to attract the best talent. And to do that, you want to be able to be providing the right environment where the younger generations can flourish.
Yeah.
And and that's how I'd answer. So two parts of that.
Yeah.
It's scientifically proven in history that we deliver greater productivity and results as communities and groups.
Yeah.
And young people have more choice than ever. So you've got to fight for that.
Yeah. And as you go on about, you talk about attracting the right talent. If you don't treat them favourably, I'm talking about within this social ecosystem, it's retaining that talent as well. And if you don't retain the talent, where does the talent go? Your competitors.
Yeah.
So if you're not retaining your talent, then they're going to go to people who you're actually competing with in the marketplace.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point, because although people have more choice than ever and people are moving jobs quicker than ever in terms of tenure, people do still seem to stay in the same industries.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's exceptions to the rule where people completely reinvent their career 5 years in and they go from being, an engineer in a factory to a salesperson in a technology company, right?
Yeah,
it's known. But generally, once people build the skill set and the traits and the experience in a certain arena, although they move every 3.5 years, they tend to move within industry, which you're right, which is right for you. Yeah. You're always at risk of losing your talent to the competition.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to really think about this, and what are you doing to allow your your employees to build meaningful relationships in the workplace. If you've got friends, true friends in the workplace, not just colleagues, right? You tend to be more fulfilled, feel more safe, feel like you've got people around you. And that is a really important element within the workplace, right? Too often, too many people you mentioned it once about the Sunday evening meme.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You only have to look on Facebook on a Sunday evening at the amount of posts that are people dreading going to work the next day.
Yeah.
Can't believe the weekend's gone so fast.
Yeah.
Not looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've had to
media.
set the alarm clock again.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating because I love what I do.
Yeah.
I know, if my wife's listening to this, she'll probably smile because we talk about it all the time. But I'm sat there smiling on a Sunday evening, thinking about what I'm going to achieve the next day.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody's like that.
No.
But why? Why is not everybody like that? Well, sometimes people are in the wrong jobs. But most of the time, I would say it's the cultures, the environment, the leadership that we are providing that makes them disengaged. And we've got to take some ownership over that.
I think you mentioned a couple of days ago the quote from, was it Richard Branson about your employees are as important as your customers?
Yeah, because the old adage of customer is king.
Yeah.
Always please the customer, but very few organizations deal with, collaborate with their employees as they would a customer.
Yeah.
Whereas Richard Branson's philosophy, wasn't it, was no, you treat your employees well and in turn they will delight your customers.
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Martin, thank you very much indeed for that. A good insight into the canteen effect, social ecosystems and everything else.
Yeah, well, that wasn't too bad.
It was all right, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks, Spence. Enjoyed that. I think we'll do it again sometime. Maybe I'll come at you with a question next time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess for anybody listening to this, leaders or managers, go away and reflect on it, think about it. You may not have the power as a board level decision maker or somebody who can completely transform an environment or an office space or whatever it might be. But what I'd ask you to do is, what can you do at a team level?
Yeah.
What can you do to allow people to build meaningful relationships, to socialize, to build trust-based relationships, and engage them in a way that will drive greater productivity?
And if you're struggling with the answers for any of those questions you're asking yourself, check out some of the pathways. You might find some thought-provoking statements and answers in some of the pathways.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheers. Good. Cheers, Spence. See you for the next T2 Hubcast.
Cheers, Martin.
See you soon.